Compared to the US, Canada really invests less in business as a share of GDP. Business investment, the average American worker produces $74 of value per hour. The average Canadian worker produces just $57 of value per hour. What enables Americans to work not harder but rather smarter than Canadians? So what does contribute to the gap? The biggest factor is the notable difference in the amount spent or invested on machines, tools, innovation, and capital per worker, what economists call capital intensity. Canadian businesses spent about $13,000 per worker on capital, while their US counterparts spent $20,500. Canada also spent very little on research and development among G7 countries. According to the World Intellectual Property Organization, the US produces roughly double the number of patents per person than Canada. Productivity growth in 2022, adjusted for purchasing power parity, was $57,800, nearly $17,400 lower than in America. This gap has not been a big problem so far because Canadians at the bottom half of the income scale are better off than Americans in their position thanks to lower levels of inequality. A measure called the Gini coefficient assesses the gaps in incomes in any given country. The Gini coefficient ranges from 0 to 1, with 0 indicating perfect equality and 1 indicating perfect inequality. Over the last 42 years, the Gini coefficient in Canada has never risen beyond its US counterpart. Inequality in the US has always been higher than in Canada and in fact has risen faster for the entirety of those 42 years. In Canada, after increasing sharply during the difficult period in the early to mid-1990s, income inequality has remained essentially flat over the last decade and fell after 2010. However, economy, its primary economic activity, revolves around mining, lumber, oil, and natural gas. In 2021, natural resources directly or indirectly accounted for 17% of nominal GDP, and they comprised 51% of the value of Canada's total merchandise exports. However, Canada's two biggest exports, oil and vehicles, are both declining and may continue to do so. Oil from Alberta's tar sands is expensive to produce, and the United States, which is by far its biggest foreign customer, is producing more of its own oil than importing. Car making has never fully recovered from the 2008 recession. Production has dropped from a peak of 3 million vehicles in 1999 to 1.4 million in 2020. So that
just bringing more cooling into the labor sort of market.
So Claire, unemployment rate rose to 5.5%, but at the same time, we are seeing that wages have increased. So how do you put that into perspective?
I think, so that definitely is a relevant question, and more so in a way, you have to consider where we're coming from, essentially. Again, just in a
The latest inflation numbers are out. Statistics Canada says the inflation rate reached 3.3% in July. That's more than analysts were hoping to see. It also adds to pressure on the Bank of Canada ahead of its next rate decision. The CBC's Anis Haydari has the latest.
It's a bit higher than the Bank of Canada's target range. Inflation, or the Consumer Price Index, at 3.3% for July. That's up from June's 2.8%. One factor that Statistics Canada pins the increase on is gasoline prices. Big drops in fuel costs from the past are no longer in the mix, and there are projections those costs will keep going up. As for that other thing most Canadians purchase, groceries. Price increases have slowed down. They went up 8.5% in July, but that still means higher prices. Even though it went up, food prices are going up more slowly than they were before. The biggest contributor, though, to that headline number of 3.3% is mortgage interest, another record gain compared to last year. Those costs are driven by the Bank of Canada's interest rates. Today's report will be a factor as the Bank of Canada decides whether to hike them again or to leave them as is. But
today is, as you say, year-over-year data from July 2022 to 2023, same time of the year. And in that time, in that year, Canada grew by 1.5 million people. It's the biggest jump, as you say, in all the G7 countries. A growth rate now for the country of 2.9%. And we haven't seen it be higher in Canada since 1957, when it was 3.3%. And that was at the height of the baby boom. And as well, contributing to that was the Hungarian refugee crisis, at which time Canada saw some 37,000 immigrants come to the country after Soviet troops marched on Budapest. Flash forward to 2023, and not similarly, but it is largely, and you said this off the top, because of new immigrants coming to Canada that we are seeing this kind of growth. 98% of the population growth is being attributed to net migration in some way. And a big contributor to that, noted by Stats Canada, are the number of work and study permits that are being issued. Stats Canada also noted the low fertility rate, record low fertility rate in Canada right now. Only 1.33 children being born to women in Canada right now. But despite the fact that there is that low record birth rate, within the next 25 years, if immigration trends continue as they are, Hannah, Stats Canada is projecting that Canada's population of now more than 40 million people will actually double.
So where are these new residents going, Sarah?
Alberta seeing the biggest growth right now in the country. It is not just because of new immigrants, but that is certainly part of what is driving this. They are also seeing, and have been for some time, seeing the highest.
Negara lain yang memiliki standar kualitas pendidikan tertinggi di dunia adalah Kanada. Negara ini memiliki kontrol mutu pendidikan yang sangat kuat. Lembaga penjamin mutu ini benar-benar bekerja secara ketat dari pendidikan dasar hingga menengah. Sehingga murid yang akan masuk ke perguruan tinggi cukup bermodalkan rapor terakhir. Di Kanada, siswa dari sekolah manapun bisa dengan mudah masuk perguruan tinggi. Pemerintah Kanada mengeluarkan dana pendidikan yang besar setiap tahunnya. Meski tidak gratis, biaya hidup dan pendidikan di Kanada cenderung lebih rendah dibandingkan negara Eropa dan Amerika Utara lainnya. Setiap provinsi bertanggung jawab penuh terhadap pendidikan. Hal ini tercantum dalam undang-undang negara. Antara lain, pendidikan bermutu, gelar yang diakui secara internasional, serta suasana dan lingkungan yang multikultural. Selain itu, Kanada juga termasuk negara dengan tingkat kriminalitas paling rendah.
Layanan kesehatan bagi masyarakat Kanada dikelola oleh pemerintah provinsi dengan pengawasan oleh pemerintah federal. Dengan membentuk Canadian Health ACT, diselenggarakan oleh Medicare.
Nutritionist as a profession in Canada. Let's start this video by talking about their roles and duties. They provide nutrition guidance, label interpretation, and consultation services to health professionals, individuals, dietetic interns, community groups, government, and the media. About their wages, that is how many dollars they earn per hour. Lowest wage in this profession according to the available data is $18 and highest wage is $50. If we talk about average wage, then it is around $36. Since we have talked about their wages, it would be appropriate to talk about their salary now. So as a nutritionist in Canada, you can earn from $40,000 up to $74,000 per year.
Justice means to treat people fairly and equally, and when applied to law, it means to judge people fairly and equally in accordance with the law. In Canada, no one is above the law, no matter if you're a politician, a police officer, or a judge. If you break the law, you will be treated the exact same as anybody else who breaks the law. Laws in Canada are based on the Criminal Code of Canada, and they are split into two general groups, public and private law. Public law decides on matters that affect all of society. So under public law, there are criminal cases, which would include murder, constitutional cases, which would be if somebody took away a constitutional right, such as free speech, and administrative cases, which include situations like if the government refused to give